Like a beautiful spider in its web, the humans were masters of death, capable of lethal violence if disturbed. Dylan Rice crashed onto the alien planet, pulling himself from the smoldering wreck of his ship. Blood stained his teeth, and his breath came in ragged gasps as he surveyed the damage. Main thrusters destroyed, shields fried, comm systems down, no way to call for help or escape this hellhole. Dylan coughed up blood and staggered to his feet. He'd been exploring uncharted space for the glory of Earth when his ship was hit by some strange energy wave. It sent him spiraling out of control and smashing into this god-forsaken rock. Now he was stranded here, light years from any human outpost with no supplies and failing life support. "Fuck!" he hissed through gritted teeth. His legs buckled and he grabbed the hot hull to steady himself. Every inch of his body hurt like hell, but he had to stay alert, had to find shelter, food, a way to signal Earth. He squinted through the smoke at his new surroundings. Bioluminescent plants glowed an eerie blue in the eternal twilight. Thick vines snaked up gnarled trees, pulsing with strange lights. In the distance, alien birds screeched a discordant song that set his teeth on edge. Dylan knew that tune well, the call of hungry predators on the hunt. He had to move fast. Strange rustling sounds came from the dense foliage nearby. Something big was stalking him from the shadows. His hand dropped to the plasma pistol at his hip as his eyes darted back and forth, searching for any sign of danger. He was a stranger in a strange land, but he'd be damned if he'd end up as something's next meal. Dylan started limping into the forest, wincing with each step. His suit was breached in a dozen places and leaking precious oxygen. The onboard computer flashed dire warnings about imminent asphyxiation. He flipped it off with an angry swipe, pushing on through the pain. He had to find a way off this rock or die trying. The Earth was counting on him to complete his mission. Humanity's future hung in the balance, but first he had to survive this deadly alien wilderness and the hungry creatures that called it home. Hours turned into days as Dylan remained trapped in the Delton facility, subjected to an endless battery of tests and experiments. But even as his captors probed and prodded him, Dylan never stopped looking for a way out. He memorized the layout of the building, noting every door, every vent, every potential escape route. And whenever he was left alone, even for a moment, he put his plan into action. With trembling fingers, Dylan accessed the Delton computer system, his heart pounding in his chest as he hacked through layer after layer of security. What he found there made his blood run cold. The Deltons weren't just studying him, they were planning an invasion of Earth. For centuries they had been watching humanity from afar, growing more and more alarmed by what they saw as a dangerous and unpredictable species. As Dylan dug deeper, he uncovered evidence of other humans who had been captured by the Deltans over the years. Men and women who had been subjected to the same brutal experiments as him, their bodies and minds dissected in an attempt to find weaknesses that could be exploited. The Deltans were preparing for war, and they would stop at nothing to ensure their victory. Dylan's heart raced as he realized the full extent of the threat facing his planet. He had to find a way out of this place, had to warn Earth before it was too late. But even as he formed a desperate plan of escape, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Vortis had been observing Dylan closely, growing more and more suspicious with each passing day. The human was too calm, too calculating for a primitive species, and when Dylan began spending long hours at the computer terminal, Vortis knew that something was amiss. As Dylan made his way back to his cell, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see Vortis standing there, flanked by 2 armed guards. The Deltan's eyes narrowed as he studied Dylan's face, searching for any sign of deceit. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Vortis said softly, his voice laced with menace. "Poking around where you don't belong. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" Dylan's heart hammered in his chest as he faced down his captor, knowing that he was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he tried to run, he'd be gunned down in an instant. But if he stayed, he'd be subjecting himself to even more horrific experiments. He had to think fast, had to find a way out of this impossible situation. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he was the only one who could stop the Deltans' plan. Dylan took a deep breath, his mind racing as he prepared to make his move. Dylan's heart raced as he slipped away from Vortis and his guards, disappearing into the labyrinthine corridors of the Delton facility. He had to find a way out, had to escape before they could drag him back to that nightmarish laboratory. But as he turned a corner, he found himself face to face with a heavy metal door, unlike any he had seen before. Curiosity got the better of him, and he pushed it open, stepping into a dimly lit room filled with strange equipment and bubbling tanks. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals and something else, something that made his stomach churn. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw them, rows upon rows of glass tubes, each containing a grotesque creature that was neither fully human nor fully Delton. Dylan recoiled in horror as he realized what he was seeing. The Deltons had been experimenting with combining human and Delton DNA, creating hybrid monstrosities that defied nature itself. Some of the creatures were little more than twisted lumps of flesh, their bodies contorted into impossible shapes. Others had recognizable features, a human face, a Delton limb, but they were all wrong, all twisted and warped beyond recognition. As he moved deeper into the lab, Dylan saw even more disturbing sights. Some of the hybrids were awake, their eyes following him with a feral intensity that sent shivers down his spine. They thrashed against the walls of their tubes, their mouths open in silent screams of rage and agony. Dylan knew that if these creatures were ever unleashed upon the universe, they would be unstoppable. He had to destroy this place, had to wipe out the Deltans' twisted research before they could perfect their abominations. But as he reached for the controls of the nearest tank, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see Vortis standing there, flanked by a dozen armed guards. "I must admit I'm impressed," Vortis said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "You've managed to uncover our little secret, but do you really think you can stop us?" Dylan's hand hovered over the control panel, his finger poised to release the hybrids from their tanks. "I'll destroy this whole place if I have to," he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "I won't let you unleash these things on the universe." Vortis laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that echoed off the walls of the lab. "You have spirit, human, I'll give you that. But you're outnumbered and outgunned. You can't possibly hope to win." He took a step forward, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. "But I'm willing to make you a deal. Help us perfect these hybrids, and I'll spare your life. You'll be given a position of power in the Delton hierarchy, a chance to shape the future of the universe itself." Dylan's lips curled in disgust at the mere thought of aiding these monsters. "I'd rather die than help you enslave the galaxy," he spat. In a flash, he slammed his fist down on the control panel, sending sparks flying as the tanks began to overload. Alarms blared, and the hybrids thrashed even more violently, their containment fields flickering and failing. "No!" Vortis roared, lunging forward, but it was too late. Dylan dove past him, racing for the exit as the lab began to shake itself apart. He could hear the Delton guards shouting, could feel the heat of their blaster bolts sizzling past his head. But he didn't stop, didn't look back as he plunged into the darkness of the corridor beyond. The facility shuddered as explosions ripped through its lower levels, the chain reaction from the overloading tanks tearing through metal and stone like tissue paper. Dylan ran, his lungs burning and his legs aching as he fled the doomed complex. He burst out into the night, stumbling and falling on the rocky ground as the facility collapsed behind him in a roar of flame and debris. Vortis and his soldiers may have perished in the conflagration, but Dylan knew that the Deltons would never stop hunting him now. He had to find a way off this planet, had to warn Earth of the coming invasion before it was too late. As he staggered away from the burning ruins of the lab, Dylan knew that his fight was far from over. The Deltons would be coming for him, and he had to be ready. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, and he was the only one who could save them from the coming storm. Panting and bleeding, Dylan raced into the Deltan ship bay, alarms blaring behind him. His eyes darted frantically until he spotted a sleek silver craft, its hatch invitingly open. He lunged inside, slamming the door shut as angry shouts echoed off the walls. His fingers flew across the unfamiliar controls, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The ship hummed to life, lifting off as Deltan guards burst into the bay, energy weapons blazing. Dylan gritted his teeth, dodging and weaving as he punched the thrusters to full power. The craft shot out of the hangar into the inky void of space. But Dylan's heart sank as a dozen Deltan warships appeared on the scanners, Vortis's face flashing onto the comm screen. "You have nowhere to run, human," the alien hissed. "Surrender now and your death will be quick." Dylan's hands clenched the controls, mind racing. The Deltan ships were closing fast, weapons locked on. Suddenly his eyes fell on a flashing red button labeled in alien script. Hyperspace. With a defiant roar, Dylan slammed his fist onto the button. The stars stretched into infinite lines. As the ship leapt forward, the Deltans vanishing behind him. He laughed in relief, only to be thrown violently as the ship shuddered and bucked. Warning klaxons screamed and sparks flew from the control panel. The drive was malfunctioning, hurtling the ship off course into uncharted space. Dylan fought to regain control, but it was no use. With a sickening lurch, the ship dropped out of hyperspace. Dazed, Dylan peered out the view screen at an unfamiliar starfield. No sign of the Deltans or anything else. He was lost in the void, damaged and alone. Despair threatened to overwhelm him. A sudden ping from the sensors caught his attention, a distress beacon, faint but clear, emanating from a nearby planet. Dylan hesitated, knowing he should focus on warning Earth, but he was badly damaged, in need of repairs and supplies. With a heavy sigh, he angled the ship towards the mysterious world. Massive grey ruins greeted him as he set down, crumbling towers stabbing into a clouded red sky. Dylan stepped out into the desolation, ash crunching under his boots. An eerie silence hung over the dead city, broken only by the groan of ancient metal. Dylan moved cautiously through the empty streets, scanning for any sign of life. Nothing stirred in the carcass of civilization. In the central square, Dylan found shattered monuments, their inscriptions worn away by centuries. Bleached bones poked from the rubble, the last remnants of a long-dead species. What catastrophe had befallen this place? As if in answer, Dylan's scanner pinged over a massive crater at the city's edge. The readings were unmistakable, the radioactive signature of Deltan weaponry. Cold realization settled in his gut as he stared into the abyss. This wasn't just a ruin. It was a mausoleum, a monument to Deltan conquest and slaughter. With growing horror, Dylan saw the truth. The Deltans hadn't come to explore or expand. They had come to exterminate, to grind a peaceful species into the dust and take their world for their own, just as they planned to do to humanity. Bile rose in Dylan's throat as he backed away from the crater. The Deltans weren't just invaders. They were an insatiable swarm, leaving only ashes in their wake, and Earth was next in line for annihilation. With a heavy heart, Dylan prepared to leave the desolate planet behind, the weight of his discovery pressing down on his shoulders. The Deltans' legacy of destruction and conquest spanned centuries, a grim testament to their insatiable hunger for power. As he made his way back to the ship, the eerie silence of the ruined city seemed to close in around him, broken only by the crunch of his footsteps on the ashen ground. Suddenly, the silence shattered as a hail of energy bolts tore through the air. Dylan dove for cover, his heart pounding in his chest as he caught a glimpse of his attackers. Vortis, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Deltan commandos, advanced on his position with ruthless determination. The once pristine armor of the Deltan commander was now scorched and battered, a reflection of the battles he had endured in his relentless pursuit of Dylan. Dylan returned fire, his weapon flashing in the dim light as he fought to hold off the Deltan onslaught. But he was outnumbered and outgunned, and it wasn't long before a searing bolt found its mark, tearing through his shoulder in a burst of pain and blood. Gritting his teeth, Dylan struggled to stay conscious as the Deltans closed in, their weapons trained on his battered form. Vortis stepped forward, his scarred face twisted in a cruel smile as he loomed over Dylan's prone body. "It's over, human," he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. Your precious Earth is already in our grasp. The invasion has begun, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Dylan's mind reeled with the revelation, despair and rage warring within him. He had failed. The Deltans had outmaneuvered him at every turn, and now his people would pay the price for his failure. But even as the weight of his defeat threatened to crush him, a spark of defiance flared to life in his heart. With a final desperate surge of strength, Dylan lunged for the control panel of his stolen ship. His fingers danced across the unfamiliar controls, activating the hidden self-destruct sequence he had discovered during his frantic escape. If he couldn't save Earth, he would at least take these Deltan bastards with him. Fortis's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. The ship exploded in a blinding flash of light and heat, the shockwave throwing Dylan and the Deltans like rag dolls. Pain exploded through Dylan's body as he slammed into the unforgiving ground, the world around him fading into a haze of smoke and debris. As he lay there, his lifeblood pooling beneath him, Dylan's vision began to blur and darken. The sounds of the battlefield faded away, replaced by a strange, otherworldly hum that seemed to fill his mind. A soft, ethereal light enveloped him, and through the haze of pain and confusion, he saw a figure emerge from the gloom. It was an alien, unlike any he had ever seen before. Its form was translucent and shimmering, as if woven from strands of pure energy. The being regarded Dylan with ancient, knowing eyes, and in that moment, he knew that he was in the presence of something truly extraordinary. "You fought bravely, human," the alien said, its voice echoing in Dylan's mind. "But your struggle is not yet over. The key to defeating the Deltans lies hidden in the ruins of our civilization, a weapon of immense power that could turn the tide of the war." With trembling fingers, Dylan reached for his wrist computer, activating a hidden distress beacon. It was a long shot, but if there was even the slightest chance that the signal could reach Earth, that humanity could find the weapon and use it against the Deltans, then his sacrifice would not be in vain. As the beacon pulsed to life, Dylan felt his consciousness slipping away, the world around him fading into darkness. But even as death closed in, he saw a vision of the future, a future where humanity, armed with the knowledge and power of the ancient aliens, rose up to defeat the Deltans and claim their rightful place among the stars. With his final breath, Dylan whispered a silent prayer for the future of his people, and as the light faded from his eyes, the ghostly alien warrior stood watch over his fallen form, a silent guardian of the secrets that could save the galaxy. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.